recorded live.
Welcome and thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. On the program today, we're going to be approaching something that I think a lot of us think about as we approach midlife, but sometimes we wonder, what do we do about it? In many cases, we've probably been on the religious path trying to make our connection with God, but trying to figure out how come we felt that it's being so elusive. Other of us really think that we've got it all figured out. The question is why, if we start making that connection, that we sometimes still feel suffering, that we feel that our lives just aren't okay enough. I mean, after all, we have a little bit of a problem that comes into our lives, or maybe big problems, and then we start looking outward and saying, looking at our neighbors, maybe our friends, and thinking, how come they've got it all together and I don't? On the program today, we're going to be talking about our divine purpose, which is the reunion of ourselves with our soul. And on the program today, we're going to be talking with someone who's presented both Soul Mastery and Soul Radiance as books and the reunion workshops. She also has events that telecast, and she has been featured on numerous TV programs and radio shows. I'd like to welcome to the Beyond 50 radio program today our guest author of Soul Reunion, our guest, Ms. Suzanne Taylor-Shire. Susan, thank you for joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program.
Thank you so much, Daniel, and I loved how you just described everyone's process. Very accurate.
Well, you know,
accurate.
It was funny because as I was reading your book, I thought, boy, you know, you're seeming so repetitious in the first, chapter, 2 or 3 chapters. And you start, honestly, and this is an honest appraisal at first, is you felt an aggravation, but then all of a sudden it started seeping in, and then you started getting more hungry about, well, what's the next one going to present here? Because it really started to vibrate and make a lot of sense. Tell us about your journey and how you came to do all this kind of work.
I will, thank you. Well, I just have to say, I hope not in defense, the reason I start out repetitiously is because people, need to hear things at least 7 times before they get it.
Dadgum marketing companies anyway, right?
Well, it's that feeling that it has to sink in, so they're like, oh, yeah, that is me. Oh, yeah, that is me. That is how I do it. Oh, yeah, okay, all right, I'll read more, fine. Mm-hmm. So how I got started is, the spiritual path is always a fascinating one. I find, like most people, it sort of creeps up on you. Some people are like, they go after it like a dog with a bone. But for some of us, just discovered that all of a sudden there I was out of college and in a spiritual community way back in the early 70s, in a spiritual community because I needed to do things differently. And it resonated to me that there were actually people who were on the same wavelengths. And community is an amazingly wonderful thing. Now, it had its drawbacks, but it got me started on being able to be with people who said, yeah, let's do it differently, please. And then I started doing my own individual work of how do we connect this thing called spiritual with our everyday life? How do we make it match up and make sense of spirituality so it's not just always heading off to India, because that's like dumb. It's not enough. We come back more discouraged about this sucky life, and we feel even more separated from our spirituality when we have to separate the two. So I've been on a journey to keep the two together and really feel like we can be in love with life itself. That's the reunion.
Mm-hmm. Now, what was that like for you as that began to happen? I mean, where were you at personally? Were you feeling that discouragement, as I was mentioning earlier in the program?
Well, it's so interesting because I seem to be the oddball. I wasn't discouraged. I just kept moving forward. I never got to the place, except when I was, divorced. Okay, I was in the community, married, and I got a divorce because the person I was with was more interested in his spirituality than in developing a relationship. I'm such a girl, and I write about it in my second book. And, that was one time where I went, this just doesn't work for me because the community really was about separating spirit and form. And I went, we can't separate it. I have to find a way to bring it together and make it work in relationship, make it work in our lives. So that was probably my point of discouragement. But I'm not a very discouraged kind of person. I'm, Miss Optimism 101. So my journey was not about rebellion and discouragement and I'm out of here and all of that. It was more about I have to find the optimistic way to approach spirituality.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have, instead of working on all the blocks all the time for people, you got to look at your childhood, you got to look at this, you got to look at that. It's like, let's just get in touch with the spiritual resources that live within you, your gifts, your soul gifts and strengths. Let's bring those forward, and the rest dissolves because we can only hold one thing at a time.
Mm-hmm. And that's the truth about it. As I was reading this, is that you start thinking about all these things. This, for any of us, the reality of suffering is it's extremely real. But at the same time, it also becomes a load of nonsense. And I was finding myself actually having reflection on that as I was reading your book in Soul Reunion. There are a lot of books out there that talk about, getting back to, the roots, or, getting in touch with God, getting in touch with the universe. There's the law of attraction, a whole slew of these things, and the secrets and the step-by-step processes. But yours actually does that. It takes that real direct step. It says, hey, your soul's right here. It's in physical form. It's here to experience what it's like to be alive and to be human. One of the philosophers that I've always enjoyed, I've quoted many times, I remember seeing, was Alan Watts, and he says, we're simply the universe becoming consciously aware of itself. And I thought, that's about as direct as you get. And the fact is that you have these experiences, but the moment that you start feeling that suffering for a period of time is the moment that you should be going back to the heart or back to the soul, because it is so infinite in what it can give. And that's what you talk about here.
Yes, absolutely. It is incredibly infinite. The soul is connected to everything, everywhere. That oneness that we crave getting to. In the book, I describe how to get access to the soul through what I call the Sacred Heart, so that it's something that you can do at home. It doesn't have to be. You don't have to go on a spiritual retreat. You do not need to spend 6 months with me to get there and learn how and all of that. It's something you can do right at home, inside, and have the tools for it. And the key that I find is, without jumping ahead here, is to realize that when we have these feelings of disillusionment, anger at the political system for being so stupid, all of that, it's just a part of us going, I do not like the human consciousness in separation. And that's the truth. We shouldn't like the human consciousness in separation, but all we can do then is go, I don't like human consciousness in separation. I want to get reconnected here. I'm going to get reconnected, bring my reconnection, reunion self, and look at the world of politics or whatever it is that we're disgruntled about and go, not, hey, I'm going to change the world, but, I see it differently from this perspective.
Mm-hmm. Now, we hear that a lot, but I think it becomes difficult for people to really be that change, as Gandhi would say, that we wish to see.
Right. That's why, I love the guidance that I've been given to help me have the tools to help people be able to do it from the inside out. Mm-hmm. There's a part of me that loves what I call spiritual self-sufficiency, which is how we are designed. Everyone who has had a teacher or a guru at some point will end up feeling some level of betrayal, because we're not supposed to learn from the outside if we get so hooked up in that person that we go, well, they're the ones that's going to teach me how to get back to God. Mm-hmm. They will inspire us, like you're talking about the quotes that you just gave of Gandhi, and you probably have dozens of quotes, I can tell. But they're inspiration. We're meant to be inspirations to each other, but not God to each other. Right.
And sometimes I think you see that too often where, all of a sudden it seems like somebody has the inside dope, and before you have it, they have their group of disciples that are following them around, and they're following the letter to the law, and this guy's just smiling, or she's glowing because of maybe the material success it's bringing her, and anybody that slides off of the rule that got them there in the first place gets chastised a little bit. Oh, boy.
That's correct. And, if that's what, That's usually, I don't believe so much in lessons, but that's a weakness in our soul, not makeup, but I call it a barnacle on our soul. Mm-hmm. So if we have a weakness that says, I need someone outside myself to point the way, then, it will end up creating suffering. Mm-hmm. Because if we're in a place that says, no, I can do it all myself, but no, I will find the people that will inspire me to take the next step, because there's always somebody who's been where I want to go, which is part of feeling taken care of, which most people do not feel that the universe really is taking care of us and will provide for us every step along the way. And that's important to know, but our soul has to be in the place of being a lighthouse within us that draws that to us and doesn't draw the people that are going to create the weakness and the suffering within us.
I think what's fascinating too, Susan, is that as you read your book Soul Reunion, is that there's a lot of thoughts that actually can occur to a person, and they may be different, but I feel that sometimes they'll also be one and the same. And the first thing that I was noticing is the fact that I started realizing, as you were just mentioning, is that we seem to be living in a day and age that everybody's looking for someone to show them how to do something. Whether it's to find that loving relationship, whether it's to build wealth, security, how to actually raise your children, things like that. We're all looking for these how-tos. And if you look at YouTube channel, for instance, you would see that probably one of the biggest queries on YouTube has simply to do with, how do I do something? It's like we just forgot how to just get out there and learn how to do it. And the big thing, too, is that you see a lot of people scratching their heads with. And I actually discovered this about 10 or 15 years ago. There was a friend of mine, a lady friend that I met through another friend of mine, and she was about 49 years old, and she was discovering her spirituality, as she liked to call it, and had apparently never had this, but a conversation or two would come up, and I started becoming more aware of people around me, and even myself, I wasn't too far off from this person who began to lose or didn't understand how to become more intuitive. Now, this is a natural thing that we have as part of our soul, an intuition of knowing what the right thing is, that inner voice, knowing the way that we're supposed to go that's unique to us, and how we seem to have been or at a point now where it seems we've lost that. At least it's been maybe put somewhere, And I wonder if maybe in a mass way, if maybe God said, you guys still aren't getting it, so I'm going to go ahead and take that aspect of you and I'm going to hide it so you have to go look for it again. So once you get it, you'll go, okay, I get it.
I don't believe that it really is that way, because that makes God sort of a trickster.
Oh, I know. But we tend to actually use him as a scapegoat more often than not, don't we?
Exactly. It's funny. But again, we have this wound of separation that we have that shows itself up in pretty much everything we do is an old soul wound. And that's what I help people with, is uncovering that soul wound so you can part the clouds and the sun can shine through, so to speak. Like you said, that you can get in touch with our natural state of intuitive knowing how to sense how to do something, how to know, how to feel, how to even just picture what it would feel like. And I think that's all part of the law of attraction these days. People are going, feel what it feels like to be in that place already, which takes a sense of creative imagination, which is part of our intuition. Mm-hmm. So we are trying to get back to that, but I find it's just old soul wounds of fear of being that powerful, being that connected, because we've gotten harmed along the way out of innocence, and we just have to go, oh my gosh, that is my God-given right to have that telepathy, that intuition. It's part of who I am, and I want to access it. I teach lots of intuition classes, and I have them as MP3 recordings on my website for people to learn in a very practical sense, like you found in the Soul Reunion book, practical sense, how to know the difference between your intuitive voice and your doubting mind, how to be able to take care of the fears that show up when you're trying to get in touch with your intuition. We have to approach things very practical It's a very how-to thing, like you said.
I think also, too, for our listeners out there is to know that in Soul Reunion that you really deal with really hard aspects of how we come to learn these lessons. And let's take the first one, for instance, for relationships, and that is when we seek love or partnership with someone else, it seems that we're finding either something that we used to have, as they say, men tend to seek out their mothers and women tend to seek out, their fathers, as it says. So that's the part that we're looking for, somebody who takes care of us. And I remember I was watching years ago, I used to get fascinated with this show. It'd come on at 10 o'clock in the evening. It was, I think it was called Blind Date. And what made the show interesting wasn't so much the dating, although that was interesting. It was the things that they would send this first date couple on to go do, And I thought that was neat. There was just some really cool ideas, especially for a first date for couples to go do. But anyway, there was one particular show that always stood out for me. There was really attractive brunette, and apparently she was someone who was a model for one of the men's magazines. And anyway, she says, I'm looking for somebody who will support me emotionally, who will support me financially, who will support me physically, and had this list of things that she was looking for somebody to support her in. And I thought, this girl just sounds like a mess. But a lot of times, that's what we do is we seek outside of ourselves something that we feel is missing. And then once that doesn't fulfill us anymore, then it's that person's fault. And so all of a sudden we, break off the relationship, get divorced, whatever it may be. And you're still going to find that same thing with somebody else. They're going to fulfill you for a while, and then it's not going to work out. But the thing is these were all things that we had inside of ourselves the whole time. Describe that process of how relationships really should be waking us up to the areas that we should nurture within ourselves to really, kind of fill up that urn, if you will.
Yes. So relationship really does bring to focus the longing of the heart to know reunion, union with our soul and all that is. So anytime we have a longing, and there's nothing wrong with those longings, which, again, relationship brings up, and let's use the example of this woman. I have a longing to be supported emotionally. Okay, great. Don't we all have a longing to be supported emotionally? So I will ask a person, what is the quality of spirit that you really want when you say, I have a longing to be emotionally supported? So in that instance, if it was a woman, they might say, I would like somebody who can just hold me 24/7. I would love to feel held by something larger that just gets me and understands me. And I'll say, great, you deserve to have that. There is not a man on this planet that has a clue how to do that, let alone can pull it off. They're not wired for it. But you can, if you start to bring in that quality of spirit and use your creative imagination to imagine a universal dimension doing that for you. And maybe it is, whether you're, way spiritual and you go, that's Archangel Michael, or I used to use the example of Mr. Clean years ago, if you remember him from over 50. Somebody came up with that resource. Oh, I always loved Mr. Clean because he was so big and strong and he could pull off anything. So they held that sense of Mr. Clean, had their heart, had their feeling realm, okay? And so when I worked with her, she goes, Mr. Clean is always with me. I love it. So guess what she did? She attracted a man who showed up who said, I can be here for you the best I know how. And she said, well, I don't need you anymore, but let's co-create together, being able to, from the place of having our need met. So she felt her needs met by this energetic metaphor of what it is to be held at a soul level, and so she could attract somebody that was willing to be there for her in ways that were real for him. So that's one way that relationship can work, is it gets us in touch with what we're longing to have at a spiritual level, at a soul level, filled out within us, that our parents, our family, our last generations never gave to us, that we can have it more filled in more for ourselves, and then we can attract somebody that we can co-create with. Much more fun that way.
And there it is. It's getting together with someone and getting in those little adventures, sort of like Luke and Laura at General Hospital, if you will. Just out there, kind of. You're getting into chaos, but you can count on each other at the same time with what your special gifts actually bring to the table. That in some way that you each kind of pretty much I'm trying to think of the right word here, but you know what I'm talking about.
I do. Yeah, we each have special gifts, and they get magnified by being with others. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. We are, in our spiritual search, we go, I want to be one with all that is. Great. Mm-hmm. We'll start with being able to be one in a moment with the partner you're with, and then we'll take it from there. Be able to hold that place with another of that sense of connection with oneness within yourself, and therefore with the person that you're with.
Now, Susan, here's the thing. Okay, so we've talked about relationship, and we've covered that for the most part to give our listeners an idea, that really you've got everything you need, but the fun part about having relationships is now you get to share, to co-create together, to kind of be in the mix and all that. Now, here's a big one, because I wanted to bring this up because you can't help but as you watch the news and you see the troubles and the problems going on, and I'm sure all of us feel this way. If you really want to know some of your baggage, watch the news for a half hour every day for a week, and you'll start seeing a lot of it come up. And that is that of redemption, or a sense of getting payback when harm or wrong has come to you. And I mean, there are people that have had some real wrongs where you think, you got to go out there and just burn that son of a gun for causing that. But yet we're taught or told that forgiveness is the element of the day that we should go to forgive that harm or that wrong that has been done with us. But secretly, if you can get that payback too, that's not so bad either. But what is that with us that feels that, on the one hand, that we want that payback, that feeling of balance, and somebody perhaps, let's say in your family has been hit and killed by a drunk driver, and pretty soon you want to see this, person suffer for the rest of their life. But that's never going to bring that person back, so the only thing you have left is forgiveness, maybe. Tell us about the idea of redemption, for instance, and why it's important for the soul to maybe move beyond what would seem to be an earthly reaction.
Yes, thank you. That's a great question, very in-depth. Okay, so...
You can feel her rolling the sleeves up on this one.
Yeah, it's good. I love a challenge. Okay, so here's what's at play. If your relative, your loved one, gets hit by a drunk driver, you feel the first thing besides shock and every other emotion under the sun, beneath all of that is a sense of helplessness and powerlessness. Your jaw is dropped open. You're like, I feel like there is just nothing I could have done. I feel helpless and powerless to make a difference. So in order to feel like you can get your power back, because, you're in shock for as long as you're in shock and feeling helpless and powerless, you feel like, okay, I'm going to get redemption so I can feel powerful again. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't work. It doesn't make us feel powerful. It makes us feel like we are... going to get power over another person, which isn't the true sense of power, okay?
Right.
So then we go into forgiveness, which doesn't make us feel very powerful either. I don't fully agree in forgiveness. We are not supposed to forgive the behavior. We forgive the human condition because we're all in it. Bad stuff does happen, but we have to know that there is something larger at work in the person's life who got hit by the hit-and-run driver. We don't know what that is. We don't walk in their moccasins, okay? Mm-hmm. Was it supposed to happen? No, not necessarily. Was it driven by a weakness in them? Who knows in that moment what they were doing? Maybe they had leaned over to pick something up on the carpet on the other side of the car. We'll never know, okay? We will never know, but our sense of helplessness, the only way to change that is not to go into trying to forgive the drunk driver, because his behavior is unforgivable. He should not be out there drinking and driving. That's just not ethical in the universal laws of being not quite our brother's keeper, but being responsible for our actions.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So we can't forgive the behavior, but we can say, yeah, this human consciousness in separation causes a lot of pain and suffering.
Mm-hmm.
And the only thing I can do now is to get back to the place of power within myself of knowing what it is to be connected and start to feel like I can make a difference in this world. And maybe that's why people go on causes to go, hey, I'm going to start getting into the cause of drunk driving.
Right.
Take hold of the situation and make it useful for others. Make it useful for yourself.
Mm-hmm. Now, in the more than 30 years, I'm sorry, it sounded like you had more to say. I'd certainly add that here.
I always could, you know.
Well, hey, this is a great subject for a lot of people, you know, because it really approaches what we all have. You know, we're erasing any religious dogma here. This isn't about that. This is truly about soul. This is what that is. That's as pure as it gets. You know, the dogma and the religion comes in because those are nothing more than tools and exercises to hopefully get somebody there that they feel good about, you know. At least that's what I think it is anyway. But in the 30 years that you've been doing this work, that's a long time. I mean, it's fair to say you've seen quite a bit, if not close to all.
Yes,
what would you say has been one of the greatest challenges with somebody that you've worked with where, for lack of a better description, you felt that their soul was amputated somehow?
Agitated.
Okay. Amputated.
That's better.
Yeah, that's what I actually said.
Excellent. I like that better.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I work at a soul level with people, and I go back into what I call the Akashic Records, what are called the Akashic Records, the records of all knowledge for all souls for all time. I will look into those records to see where their soul got disconnected.
Mm-hmm.
And like you say, the worst case scenario is the closest thing to amputation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and usually what happens in that place of amputation is not a victim situation where somebody came and lopped off their soul. You know, it doesn't work like that. It takes two to tango. Somebody has to buy in to the big bad wolf. Someone has to say, yes, I will give my life blood to you. You can be my vampire for all time. And then they give their soul away. That is soul amputation. You say, someone else can be responsible for my soul. Now, it's usually because they buy into it, because that soul, that being that comes to them, you know, sells them a whatever we're going to call it, okay, a package, and says, I will give you love, I will give you power if you give me that gift of yours. And often it's love. You know, the soul that's been amputated has the power of love within you, and the soul that does the so-called amputation is missing that. It's a soulless entity, and they run around out there and here. We see lots of soulless entities. They need you like a vampire needs blood, okay? They need you, and you go, sure, you can have me because I'm an endless source of love. Well, our endless source of loveness is not designed to be given to a human being. It is designed to be held sacred and radiantly released through us, but not given away. So when we give ourselves and our soul gift away, we will feel a sense of soul amputation. There is nobody evil out there that has taken something from us that we did not give in the first place.
Yeah, see, and that's something it took me, it was about 5 or 6 years ago that I started realizing, you know, that's so totally true. It's funny how we tend to want to be such victims, you know, of circumstances.
Oh, yes.
And it's like, you know, and this was actually something that came to me about 11 years ago. I was interviewing a guest on money, for instance, and she wrote a wonderful book about the energy of money, and she says, you know, let's take a look at some truth here. She says, you know, the reason that I wrote this book is that I had an experience with money. You know, here I was, a prominent psychologist, you know, doing very, very well, thought that I had, you know, the inside know on everything, and all of a sudden I lost more than $10,000 on an investment. And, and it was, given away to somebody who was basically a hustler. That's what it all comes down to.
Mm-hmm.
And she says, now it'd be easy for me to sit there and tell all of you folks that, look, I got screwed by somebody who was dishonest. But she says, I really started taking a look at the reality and the truth of that situation there and why it happened. And she says, I'm here to tell you today that the reason I wrote this book is the truth, and that is I was greedy. This guy promoted something to me that caused the greed to stir that made me go beyond the rational to the irrational, and I handed him my money like a stupid puppet. And I'm here to tell you, when you take a look at any of your suffering, find out how you are the co-participator in this, that you make that agreement as you're talking about here, Susan.
Absolutely. I completely agree, and I'm so glad you're bringing this out because, as I said, it takes not just two to tango, but you were talking earlier about intuition. When we don't listen intuitively, that's when stuff happens. Mm-hmm. There's lots of examples of people who were killed, that it's because they didn't listen and they were in the wrong place at the wrong time. Or, like you said, greed took over and something in them went, I don't really want to do this. This is all for my survival and greed and fear and manipulation and all of that. But, hey, let me just do it once. I'll eat that quart of ice cream. It doesn't matter this time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, what, takes over, puts you in the hospital, whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah, and we always know. And if we own that, then we get back in touch with our soul that says, okay, there is no such thing as forgiveness. You're reconnected again. You're on track again. We didn't need to forgive you because we never judged you in the first place. We are just glad that you're reconnected so you don't have to suffer anymore.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want you to suffer.
Mm-hmm. I think it's fascinating that when you take a look at the United States with all the media that surrounds us, that we have become really adept at turning ourselves really against ourselves is what it comes down to. You look at the political process, especially with the election of Barack Obama, and there was hope. And, as I was sharing with my wife and many other people, it isn't so much this person stepped into office because there was the hope he could change anything that's been going on for decades and decades of presidencies. It really doesn't matter. They've all been, to a degree, complicit in doing the same thing because, to a degree, we've allowed it to happen. We've become passive. But I said what was important in that election wasn't so much that he could make change, it was that we felt that our vote mattered because of the election steal, allegedly, of 2000 with George W. Bush. Okay?
Right.
Now, that was really key. We didn't care who got into office as long as it wasn't a Republican that could be tied to the Bush administration. That's all we cared about, And now you take a look at what's going on, and as George Bush came out of office, and if you take a look at political history, it's really no different than what he did that's been going on for decades. And that is, as I'm going out of office, by the way, I've screwed the economy also now, and we're going to be asking everybody to start anteing up for mistakes that we were allowed to make. And so he can go out of office, and people are going to hate this guy. He's the one that's caused me to lose my jobs and all this kind of thing. Now Barack stepped in. He can't change this, because what do you do in a couple of years that's been going on again for decades? And so now we're going to blame him. And since he's not fulfilling that need, now we're going to blame Wall Street because that's where it all started in the first place. It's like, folks, okay, so now we've gotten these people blamed. What's next? Yeah, it's hard out there. It's not easy, that all these things have happened the way they do. But what are you doing about it, and especially when it comes to personally how you view the whole thing? This is a good level of mastery and soul lesson that we can all be learning on how to really exercise that soul muscle.
Absolutely, absolutely. There is a soul perspective, and we all, in essence, have touched it in a moment of, like you said, there was a moment of hope that there is a way through. We're talking 2012 and all of that right now.
Mm-hmm.
We have to hold that place not only of hope, but we have to move it down, as I write in that book, and I think every one of my books, move it from hope, which is sort of above the head, to faith, to trust, which is the heart, to knowing, which is the gut, and everything in us goes, I know we can turn this ship around. We have to hold that knowing, and I believe that that's part of what Occupy Wall Street is about. We know we can make a difference, so we're going to go out there and do it. Now, it's awfully rough. Everything starts out a little rugged and rough when it's new. But we've seen it around the world, people standing up and going, hey, this doesn't work for me. I'm going to stand up and say it doesn't work for me. That's a sense of knowing that things can be different. How people, in Europe have said, this government doesn't work for me, and I'm going to speak up because I know it can be different. We don't necessarily know how it can be different, but we know it can be different, and it's up to us to make it a different place. And one of the things that I do appreciate about Barack is that he will always stay with the people. He's connected to the people so that our voice can be heard as much as possible, because it is up to us. As we're seeing these days, it's not up to politicians anymore because, they got their own middle school way of viewing things. And it's us saying, wait a minute, we have to make a difference here. And a new president isn't going to make a difference. What are we going to do?
Yeah, because I believe that we've all sat too passive for too long, and it's really, it can even be sickening for anybody who really loves to listen to talk radio, which I participate in, to listen to. There's so many political talk shows, and it's, one side of the net or the other, and I'm thinking, where do these people get their information? And as you listen to it, you think, but you've really not said anything either. So have we become a society? And I would have to also say this is possible around the world, that we just don't want to take responsible action or even responsibility for anything that happens anymore, unless it's good and safe.
Well, it's true. Safety is a good note for you to speak on, or that I'd like to speak on. We have a tremendous amount of fear that if we stand up for ourselves at a soul level, we're going to be crucified. We're going to have our head amputated. All sorts of bad things will happen. But we have to remember that once we get connected at a larger level within ourselves to the power of love, to the sense of endless possibilities for creation that lives within us that we can reconnect to, then we are not so caught in survival that it matters whether or not everybody likes us or not. We have to stand up for what's true for our soul. And the voice inside that says, yes, do this. Yes, contribute this way. Yes, you are valuable. Yes, you are significant. Yes, you as an individual can make a difference.
I totally agree, especially with yourself. Now, ultimately, what I've seen real consistently when it comes to someone who produces a book, let's like say Soul Reunion, or it could be the Law of Attraction, the Power of Forgiveness, it goes on. And we've certainly had a lot of guests on our program, about these things, including the dogs. They've got quite a bit to say as well, I'm sure. If there's any way that you're ever going to have a soul connection, it's having an animal telling you how to do it, because they understand it better than anybody. They don't have all those ridiculous human filters in the way. So get yourself an animal, folks. Now, they're about as direct as it gets. But here was a conversation, and it was real brief because it was late in the evening, that I had with my wife, and it was something, we were watching a movie last night. Of all things, aliens come to Earth because apparently in their world, the gold is as rare as it is here on Earth. So they need to come to Earth to get our gold. Imagine that. But I started thinking for some reason, because a lot of us really are feeling that suffering of the economy. There's a good number of people that are, but then also I look around my neighborhood, and there are a lot of people that don't seem to be suffering at all. It's like it's a non-event. But what I started thinking about was, when you think about all the fables, because she brought up a fractured fairy tale from Rocky and Bullwinkle about the mermaid. And I thought, it hit me right as she was describing, well, you remember the little fisherman that caught the mermaid, and the fractured fairy tale and Rocky and Bullwinkle? I said, yeah. Because we were thinking about the economy. We were kind of talking about that. And it finally hit me. I said, do you realize that in just about every fairy tale, when it comes to somebody getting a hold of somebody, I don't care what race it is or culture it is. Everybody's got their fairy tales. That when somebody gets something of magic power, the first thing they wish for is wealth and riches. And I said, why is that? And I said, I wonder if anybody can ever answer that question.
Oh, sure. That's easy.
Oh, you can. Okay, well, there you go. Well, see, this was a question I posed just last night, and you're the first person outside of my wife that I've talked to about it. So take your best shot. Why is it that when we get the genie in the lamp, the first thing we wish for are riches?
Okay. First of all, I want to say that was not my dog barking.
Oh, okay.
I do not have a vicious dog. I was actually sitting outside. I'm in Southern California, and it's a beautiful day. So I was sitting outside, and the neighbor's just happened to get a Rottweiler recently. Nothing against Rottweilers, but he was let outside and came to the fence and decided he was going to bark at my dog. Doesn't bark. So I apologize for that.
But because your dog didn't bark back, it's in touch with its soul. It's connected.
Oh, he's very great. He's
there you
really
go.
Great. He's like, I don't need to bark at you. He goes up, wags at him, and goes, dude, stop. Come on.
Yeah, really. Let's go surfing or something. Anyway.
Exactly.
So we all have the need, and we get the magical mermaid or the Aladdin's lamp that we that we wish for riches. It's first wish.
Let me address the alien thing because it all fits in. We, all of us came because anybody on this call is someone who is interested in their soul nature, their deeper nature, their beingness, their essence. All of us came to this world because we said from an alien perspective, we were, in an alien dimension, another dimension, we said, planet Earth, oh my gosh, it has a physical capacity here like no place else. It has consciousness and awareness, experiencing, I call it consciousness experiencing creation. We can do that in a human form here like no place else, okay? So every soul came here to experience and explore this human dimension as a fun adventure, believe it or not. Okay.
May not feel that way, but yes.
Yeah, exactly. But when we get to the essence of it, it's like this place is fantastic. But we've lost track of that, obviously, because we've gotten greedy and we're into survival and all that kind of stuff. So why people want, and there are a lot of fairy tales that are based on metaphors that relate to our soul challenges, and our soul's recognition.
Absolutely.
Which involves all of them. They're beautiful, channeled depictions of something, I believe. So, wealth and riches. It really is the wealth and riches of the soul that people are wanting to get back in touch with. Because when we were souls out in a larger universe, we were connected to everything, everywhere. We knew the abundance of the power of creation that creates all this life, that creates babies, that creates it all. That's a huge power. That's the wealth that can create anything it wants to. When we think of the universe, the divine God, it goes, oh, let's try a palm tree. Oh, let's try snow. Let's try, it's all an adventure, okay? That's the wealth and the riches we want. We want to be able to feel as though we are that connected, that like the law of attraction, there isn't anything we can't manifest again. That's the wealth that we're looking for. So that's why we say we want wealth and riches, the ability to have that wealth and connection to wealth and richness again.
Now, here's the thing, is I'm looking on your website, which I believe is soulmastery.net. Is that what it is? Okay, great.
Yes, it is.
There was something, it was just not too long ago, I had an opportunity to interview a guest, and it was talking about, she was talking about past lives. So we do have a soul DNA, and that's what comes out here on your website. Yes. What is a soul DNA exactly?
Okay. So imagine that our soul travels with us through lifetimes,
right?
Through universes, all of that. It captures the record of our soul experience as it goes along, which becomes its DNA, its record. You have experienced this. You have gone here. You wish to have this. This is important to you. It's held in a record which becomes the DNA. so that we don't have to keep doing Groundhog's Day and repeating everything.
Although some people do.
Yeah, they do. So that DNA connects us to, is the form of connecting us to the knowledge that we need, the wisdom we need of how the universe, the divine, works and can work through us, so that we have that coding within us of how to make it all work.
Mm-hmm.
So we can access it in a human form.
So then it is true that past lives have existed for us.
Absolutely.
But even
Lives
furthermore, I was going to say...
Before we came to the earth.
Oh, before we came to the earth, okay.
Before we came to the earth, we were a soul and have had a lot of different experiences as a soul, and then we chose coming to planet Earth because it looked like a really cool adventure of physicality.
Mm-hmm. Now, is it something that people have come back to Earth several times?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, because I keep remembering the movie Defending Your Life, Albert Brooks, and, he goes off to Judgment City when he dies, and it's to judge 9 days of his life to decide whether or not he's able to move on into the big universal machine, And he says, so have I been to Earth before? And he says, well, yeah, you have. And he says, about how many times? He says, about 9 times. And he says, is that good? He says, well, I've known people who've been to Earth hundreds of times, although I wouldn't want to hang out with any of them. But, you start thinking about this whole idea, as I was talking with this guest, several weeks ago, about, the past lives and how when you can go back and you can discover what that karmic mind is, that work that maybe we're here in this lifetime to discover what that is, that we can heal it now in this life. It heals the past, and it takes care of the future all at the same time. That that it's just kind of an amazing thing to think that we could be living a life that we think is our own, but really it's the culmination of things that we've probably already done, and the discovery of that we can erase that to where we can really claim our soul again and start, really afresh. But kind of describe that. I feel as though I'm kind of complicating the thing here, but I'm not meaning to.
Yes, I do need it just simplified slightly for me.
Okay, so you're born with a soul. Okay,
yes.
So you live one life and you've had all of these experiences, and then you die, as a human does. Then you come into the next life and you start doing what seems to be the same things again that maybe caused the suffering in the last life.
I see what you mean.
Yeah, but you don't really want to do that, but you're not really aware that you're doing it, that this is a past life karma, if you will. They're not, and so the idea behind what she was saying is to tap into what is that karma that you're working off, realize it's happening, you can take care of it right now, you can erase it from now, you can erase it from your past, and prevent it in your future, all at the same time. Yeah.
Absolutely. That's part
That's
of
what
why
I'm talking about.
Yes, I understand now. Thank you so much. Sorry. Why I work at a soul level with people is because most of our issues go back to a soul dimension, a soul challenge. And when we turn that around, not only just turn it around, but get the resources that we disconnected from in the first place, when we attain those again, then we're good to go. But the trick has been that we keep, working at clearing karma, and then we never get the opportunity to reconnect with the soul and the soul dimensions that we're missing in the first place. That's when we stop the karmic wheel, is when we get so reconnected that we don't have to keep playing these things out again, because we're full of the soulfulness that we need in our life. Yeah.
So do you feel that's where sometimes people really, that deja vu is a very real thing?
Yes, absolutely.
So how's it been for you? Did you discover what your soul DNA was? And, what did you do about it? Obviously, you've done a lot of things, but what has it been like for you?
Well, what I've discovered is what my soul gifts and purposes are.
Okay.
And it's helped me to feel not only a sense of that my soul gifts are to be able to bridge this place between spirit and form and make our human life filled with spirit that it's like, oh, well, I knew that. That's my soul gift, of course. It activates a sense of I can use everything that I am, which is my soulfulness, to bring that forward in my life so that there is a sense that I can move forward in life easily and naturally from my soul and from my heart.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And so one of the biggest things that we here in human form, we seem to be dealing with, and I know we've touched on it through the program here, is fear.
Yes.
Talk to us about what fear is, because one thing, referring back to the movie Defending Your Life, is we spend a lot of time on Earth, dealing with fear. It's like a big cloud that hangs over us. But remove that out of the way, and, buddy, you're in for a roller coaster ride of your life.
Well, I feel that fear is the biggest Barnacle challenge that we work with. It all comes down to fear.
Mm-hmm.
Fear that if we are in our greatest place of connection to all that is, that something harmful will come and bite us in the butt. And but when we get connected again, when we are in the true power of ourselves, then we can't get bit in the butt because we're too powerful to be afraid of anything out there that might hurt us, because there's a feeling that there is nothing out there that we need to protect ourselves from and be afraid of. Everyone knows that when they are in, when they're first in love, they've got all these endorphins going in their body, and they could walk down the middle of, a freeway and go, I'm just fine. Nothing's going to touch me because I'm just so connected. And there is something true to that, Sometimes it can be naive, but there is something true to that for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, I actually agree with that.
Mm-hmm. And we aren't harmed.
I agree with that. I remember it was about 12 years ago that I had the opportunity to interview with Sakyong Mipalm Rinpoche. And for anybody who's actually been out there reading a lot of books on spiritual development and whatnot, his father was Trungpa Rinpoche. And so he comes in studio, and it was really a fascinating experience because he's wearing the emperor's clothes, if you want to call it that. He's got his entourage with him, that are basically carrying what he isn't wearing. He just comes sashaying in. I go and I receive him in the lobby, and I bring him into the studio, and we have an interview, and the guy's just sharp. He's right there. It isn't one of those where you soft-toe step around. You can just talk with this guy like you're in a bar having a drink if you want to, And the thing that I noticed that I always describe to people about this experience was, as I was in the lobby with him, that I experienced a calm within the room, that we could be out in battle with bombs dropping around us, and that's exactly where they would land, around us, and you wouldn't have to worry about anything. And it was an amazing calm feeling, energetically speaking. But this is something that he, helps people to understand. This is something we all can be.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But it has to be it's not just within us, a little small place within us. It's a sense of connection to a larger power moving through us, moving in us, that we get reunited with, that allows us to feel a force field around us, that we are in our own universe, and we really create a universal reality. We can do that, and we can change the world.
The observer-created reality is very real then. Fascinating stuff. Because we were talking earlier, Susan, about, how we go along and we're in the blissful state where things are working out, and then all of a sudden the harsh thing comes along and basically kind of blows us out of the water. Earlier this year I was talking with a woman who wrote a book about quantum thinking. And she says, you got to really take a look at universal laws and the context of the universe itself. So you married the perfect man or the perfect woman. You've got the perfect little lifestyle with the perfect little kids that seem ideal to not only yourselves and everyone else. Then one day your house burns to the ground and perhaps you've lost one of your children or your whole family. She says, from the context of the universe, that's not unusual, because the universe is a chaotic, unpredictable place in the first place. It's how you move through and you deal with those situations, your opportunity to think through those things, and in your case, from a soul level, that has you understand that these things just do happen in the context of universal laws. And that is a really powerful way to think about things, because certainly the victimhood would have no place for that in that understanding.
That's right. That's right. It's a very powerful place. I agree with that completely. Yes, definitely, Daniel. Great.
Susan, you do great work. 30 years
Thank
of it.
you.
And I've got to say that, people would really find this a really wonderful, fascinating read. It had eerie moments for me because I started thinking, I've got a soul inside of my body and it's looking out, that feeling of awareness. So as people are looking for their souls, how can they, for one, find the book and find you as well?
Great. Soul Mastery, you can Google Soul Mastery and get in touch with me and find my website, soulmastery.net, Susan Taylor Shire. The book you can get on my website, through Amazon, through any bookstore. You can find it just about on any street corner that you want. Soul Reunion, the return home from separation, and enjoy it as much as Daniel did.
Very much so. Soul Reunion is the book, The Return Home from Separation. Our guest here on the Beyond 50 radio program, Susan Taylor Shire. Susan, thank you for joining us again on the Beyond 50 radio program.
Excellent to be with you. Thank you so much for all you're doing, Daniel. It's fabulous.
You bet. Thank you again.
Okay.
Thank you to listeners out there for tuning in. This is Beyond 50. I'm Daniel Davis. Again, thank you for joining us. And remember, live your day past halfway.